Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Ben Babington. I'm the Vice President of the UCL Civil Engineering Society. I'll be your moderator today. Welcome to this event, a fireside chat with Dr. Ali Parsa. Just before I introduce our guests, some brief housekeeping. Firstly, the obvious, please make sure you're muted unless you're asking a question. We will have a Q&A at the end for which you can enter your questions into the chat box, and Basil will be inviting people to unmute and ask their questions. Lastly, we are recording the call and the recording will be made available later. Now on to our guest. Dr. Ali Parsa is a British-Iranian healthcare entrepreneur and engineer. He's the founder and CEO of Babylon, the revolutionary artificial intelligence and digital health company. Babylon's mission is to put an accessible and affordable health service in the hands of every person on earth. By combining cutting-edge AI technology and the best available medical expertise, Babylon gives people 24-hour access to affordable, holistic health services. The company is home to a large, passionate team of scientists, clinicians, mathematicians, and engineers, all recruited from over 60 different countries. With over 3 million users, Babylon is transforming the way healthcare works across Europe, North America, Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. But before Babylon, Dr. Parsa created The Circle, which became Europe's largest partnership of clinicians, with some 200 million pounds of revenue, 3,000 employees, and with a successful IPO. The Independent Healthcare Awards presented Dr. Parsa an Entrepreneurial Achievement Award for establishing Circle. He was given the Royal Award for the Young Entrepreneur of the Year for founding his first business, V&G, and more recently was listed in the Times 100 People to Watch. The Health Service Journal recognized him as one of the 50 most influential people in UK healthcare. He was featured in the Maserati 100, a list that recognizes game-changing entrepreneurs who are disrupting the world of business. He also won the CEO Award by Finance Monthly and ACQ5's UK Game Changer of the Year. He's a UK Cabinet Office Ambassador for Mutuals and has a PhD in engineering physics. Also, he completed his undergraduate degree at our very own UCL CEGE department. So it's my great honor to welcome to the call Dr. Ali Parsa.
Thank you very much, Ben. That's incredibly kind of you. As you read that bio, I am embarrassed. We need to make sure we change it wherever you got it from. It sounds a lot posher than the reality.
Thank you. I got it from your office. So
I know we need to put a little bit more humility into my bio. But thank you.
Well, we've heard there about some of your recent sort of extraordinary accomplishments, but I'd like to start really by going back to what your experience was like at UCL CEGE.
I had a great experience. I mean, I guess with most people, when you join university, and now I have my own children, and my daughter has just started university, and I guess this is just about the worst time to start university for anybody. But I had a phenomenal time, and I totally enjoyed it. I loved the department. I loved the university. I was highly active outside the outside the department. I became finally in my second year the chair of the student union. So I loved it. I had the greatest time, and I envy you. This is some of the best times of your life, and I hope you're enjoying it hugely.
Thank you. Yes, I certainly am enjoying it. Getting to speak to you through a society outside of my studies is definitely a big bonus part of university life. So you said that you were very involved in the students' union, but you also started a company alongside your studies. Was this the first time you'd done something entrepreneurial, or was there an even earlier example?
No, I started a company when I was doing my PhD, not during my undergraduate studies. And partly because I needed the money. I didn't have any support, and I needed the money. So I did a PhD. I had the grant. The department was incredibly generous. And at the time, the department used to get one SCRC grants a year. And they awarded me that grant for the period of my PhD, which was, as I said, very generous of the department. Professor Simons, who's just retired, was behind this, and I'm forever indebted and grateful to him. But it wasn't enough. It was around £2,500 a year, if I remember it correctly. I can't remember it exactly. So, and I didn't have family support, so I needed to do something to make money on the side to sustain my studies.
So just going back to that decision, following your undergraduate, you decided to pursue a PhD, and then alongside that, the business grew out of a necessity. What was that decision-making process like to carry on with studies?
To do a PhD. So as I said, I got involved in the student union. I then got elected to the National Union of Students. So I took a year off basically to work at the National Union of Students. And then I spent a year kind of messing around with the International Union of Students, which was a United Nation body of various student unions. I'm delighted I did that, because that's where I met my wife, who has ever since been my partner in life. So that had a huge bonus. But I think my father, who unfortunately I just lost this year through COVID, and my mother came and said, look, enough is enough, time to come back and do and follow it with life, which I did. I came back. And I guess it was a combination of not knowing what you want to do. And I came from a culture where study and education was very important. So I decided to do a PhD. And I was academically okay. And the department very generously gave me the grant that I mentioned to you, the scholarship. So it kind of all fell together. But I think during my PhDs, I kind of figured out the academic life is not for me. And that was, again, a big lesson. I think I know that when I talk to my own children, to younger members of my employees, many friends I have who are at your age group, people often kind of think that they need to have plans for everything. And the reality is that life is a learning experience, and you kind of do something and you think that's your plan, but from that experience, you learn that this is not for you. And I think the worst thing is to stick to those plans, even if you find that is not good for you. And you find many times people who are at the later stages of their lives, and they say, look, I always knew this is wrong, but I stuck to it. I mean, I just think that's just wrong. I mean, I just think that every experience we do, it's a learning opportunity. And once you learn from it, you need to adjust what it is that you want to do. If you love it, you keep doubling on it. And if you don't, you cut them, you move, right? And the academic life, unfortunately, was not for me, partly because I wasn't very good at it, right? I mean, it's not, I just really wasn't. And you see that. You see some people are fantastic in thinking academically, and are not that bothered with the other aspects of life or society, and they like the somewhat lonesome life that the academic life brings you, particularly research. But it wasn't for me. So it's a combination of what I was good at and what I liked, that didn't add up for me to follow academic.
Thank you. So first of all, I'm sorry to hear about your father passing. So would you say that even though you eventually decided not to follow a career in academia, that PhD which you completed was worthwhile? Would you take that PhD again now if you go back?
A good question, because I struggled with that decision many times, because a PhD, I was doing it part-time. It took 5 years. It's a very important 5 years of your life. I did it from, I guess, the age of 22, 23 to 27, 28. It's a critical for formative years of your life. For me, personally, I think on balance, I'd rather if I didn't do it, because there was all the things I would have done that would have been directly related to what I did. But do I regret doing it? Absolutely not. I think a PhD is a wonderful way of contemplating, of learning how to learn, if it's problem solving, because there is really no one. It's just you and your supervisor and the big wide world, and you need to find a problem and you need to fix that problem. And so it's I wish, interestingly, at this stage of my life, I give anything to have the opportunity to be given a problem where I can really go deep to try to solve that problem over a period of time.
So then, following the PhD, well, this is from my research on the internet, so it may not be true, but you decided to kind of take another direction, and you ended up in finance at one time. Was that following the sale of your company VNG?
That's correct. So when we sold Victoria Anguilla, I mean, I basically sold it as soon as I knew my PhD is coming to an end. I didn't want to run this. And the bankers who sold it for us, per the hours of work they did, it seemed like that is a much more lucrative business to be in than building your own company or doing what I was doing. So, and I was an immigrant, I was a refugee, and there was an appeal of joining what I called at the time is the establishment, to put a nice suit on and go to a nice office and all the things that I did not have as a refugee, or did a word I didn't know about. So I applied, and I really didn't even know the difference between existing banks. I had to do a lot of research to find out what I want to do. But once I was given the offer to join, I joined an investment bank, and again, I wouldn't do it today, but it was a phenomenal learning experience.
Would you say that you mentioned learning how to learn in your PhD? Did that make it easier for you to get up to speed with the investment banking world?
Yes, of course. But remember, by the time I joined, I was 27 or something like that, 28, I can't remember. And I was trying to learn stuff that people 4 or 5 years younger than me, who had just come out of university and joined directly investment banking, were trying to learn, right? So that is tough, right? But but older age, maturity, having a PhD helped, because while I was behind everybody in my class, if you wish, when I joined, because they had so much more experience. I remember by the end of the first year, I was ranked in the top 3% of the class among my peers. And that's because I was older, right? I mean, not older than everybody. People come from different backgrounds, especially if you're, say, from Germany, you arrive at the same kind of age, but older than most. So I guess while it made my start slower, eventually it helped me accelerate and catch up, um, to make up for the lost time.
So you joined the establishment, as you said, and you had this lucrative job in investment banking. What then caused you to step back into creating a business again, going through that hard process of starting something from nothing?
Investment banking is not for me. And it wasn't for me for a variety of reasons. One is, and again, there is nothing wrong with working to make money and measuring your success by how much money you produce for yourself or for your clients or for the bank. I don't want to make a moral judgment about that, but for me as an individual, that wasn't satisfactory. I came from a family of builders. Like my father was a civil engineer, my mother was a cartographer. So and I had built a business before, and I loved, I guess, what you do in civil engineering or in management consultancy. You are in the business of projects, right? You do one project, you move on to the next, you move on to the next. Intellectually very stimulating, but you don't build anything, right? But I wanted to build something, and I think both financially and intellectually, building something is better because you have compounded effect. The more you work on something, the more you learn. The more you learn, the deeper you can go. The deeper you go, the more complex layers of the problem you find and you solve, and so on and so forth. So it becomes a virtuous circus of deeper learning, bigger problems to solve, and becoming more competent in your subject. And financially, of course, building your own business, you have a compounded effect, because you're not just making your salary, but you're increasing the value. And even if the value increases 20, 30% a year, it is increasing on top of what it has built before. So for me, that was a much more satisfactory way of doing things. So I decided to leave when my first child was born. I had this kind of I was in my mid 30s by then, and I decided that, if I want to make a change, I better make a change now. So I took my normal 2 weeks paternity leave, and then I went and saw my boss, who used to run Goldman at the time in Europe. And I said to him that this time I just can't do this anymore. I need to go and chase my own objective. And at the time, if you left investment banking, you usually had other jobs. As you say, it's highly lucrative. It was just like madness to leave a great job with a child. Now all these other responsibilities. So my boss thought I'm having a nervous breakdown or something. So he said, look, take it 6 months. Again, in my life, I came across incredible number of kind people. So he said, look, take 6 months, look around the firm, see what else do you want to do in Goldman. And so I kind of was in this zombie land of doing nothing and hanging around. And after 6 months, I said, look, this actually consolidated. I want to go and build my own business, which I did, starting from scratch.
You did your PhD in engineering physics, and then you moved to finance. And then the business you then went into was in the healthcare space. What attracted you, or how did you land on tackling the problems in healthcare?
So I used to do a lot of sports. I still try to keep fit, but at the time when I was your age, I used to do a lot of sports. And I had injured, I was carrying a number of injuries, particularly my knees, as people do during sports, right? As I left Goldman, I had a period of time where I had time in my hand. So I decided to do the corrective surgery on my knee that I had to do all the time, but I just didn't have time to do, because when you do knee surgery, you're kind of immobile for a while. So you put it back until you have the time to do it. So I did that. And frankly, I looked at the private hospitals that I did my surgery in, and I thought, if this is the best private hospital in London, surely I can do better than this. So I thought that I'd go and build private hospitals that are of much higher quality. So I hired Norman Foster, the architect, to say, why can't we build some of the most beautiful buildings? And I hired Michelin star chefs saying, why can't we cook amazing food, right? So the concept, any business that you do, what you're trying to do is that what exists and how can I make something so much better than what exists, and therefore provide a much better choice. And I thought that in the hospital industry, there was the possibility of making something a lot better than what existed. And that kind of got me going with the idea of building my chain of hospitals, which I did. Serendipity, I guess.
You build this chain of hospitals trying to make it a magnitude of order higher than what was available out there. What would you say was different? Because you're not trying to solve the same exact problem with founding Babylon. What was it the same reason, seeing an issue in healthcare availability, that you wanted to increase that, or was there an entirely different reason?
So that's it. On the hospitals, the thing I observed. Oh, I mean, I say about how the doctor, how it was important to get the how it was important to get the right architecture and the right service. But the thing that was most important was to get the right management structure. Hospitals at the time was strange. It was the only places I could see that the people who got quadruple A's in their A levels were being managed by people who got 2C's and a D's. And I'm sorry to be elitist about that, but there was a complete disconnect between the doctors who were delivering the services and sometimes the management of hospitals, right? I mean, and their capabilities. They were just badly managed organizations. So if you want, our unique selling point was why fitted with hospitals what I knew and I had learned in investment banking, which is to get the investment bankers run investment banks, and why couldn't we get doctors run hospitals? So we created a partnership of doctors, and by the way, and within a few years that became the largest partnership of consultants and specialists in Europe. We had about 1,700 consultants and specialists who partnered together with the idea of building their own chains. So that was our unique selling point. And then once the doctors and the nurses and all hospital employees co-owned it, so it was a co-op, 50% owned by them, 50% owned by investors. The idea was then how do you make it an amazing place for the patients and to do a great service for them. So that was the problem we were trying to solve, the problem of how hospitals were managed. I'm just sad to see that problem, that just didn't get solved, right? That is still the case in healthcare. Unlike almost any other professional services business I know, management consultancies, accountancies, investment banks, they're all run by the professionals, but that is just not true in healthcare.
When you were starting out to try and change this management structure in hospitals, how did you build that initial team of doctors who would take on management responsibilities? Because surely not all doctors potentially want to be involved in managing hospitals, or they might not have the character attributes. I'm just wondering, how did you go about selecting those people?
Well, it's a difference between being a manager. Not all investment bankers manage the investment bank, or management consultants manage the management consultancy, but there is a difference between managing it and owning it and taking responsibility for it and making the key decisions on it, right? We didn't expect the doctors to manage the facilities. We wanted them to have a say in what is the right thing to do in the hospitals. And I still believe that's the right thing. I think not just about hospitals, I think in anything, in your life, in your career, decisions need to be made by those who are closest to the problem. And the further you are from the problem, the less you know about the problem, right? In biology, we know that a human being shares 83% of its DNA with a cockroach. What makes the difference is that 17%. And I'm always amazed when people say, I know 80%, I know enough about the problem to be able to make decisions on it. It's those details that make a difference between a good decision and a bad decision. And you cannot be remote from that. So I'm a huge believer that the intelligence of many is always more than the intelligence of a few. It doesn't matter how intelligent those few are. And those who are closer to a problem see it much better than those who are away from it. It doesn't matter how good their eyesight is.
So if I could ask you, you're the CEO of a very large company at the moment. How do you try and stay close to the problems that Babylon deals with? How do you,
So I am not, and that's that's just one of the unfortunate parts of my job, is that by definition, I mean, today we employ well over 2,000 people, and we're in, I don't know, 11 offices across the globe. So by definition, you're not. My job is not to be close to the details. My job is to create a place in which we can bring the best people we can gather with a mission and a zeal to do something exceptional. So it's a place where we can where we can find exceptional people with a zeal and to do something exceptional, and then create the environment in which they could do their best. That really is my job. It is not, my job is not to solve every problem or micromanage good people. And good people do not want to be micromanaged. Good people want to have the freedom, the autonomy to do what they're the best at.
What sort of characteristics, other than that zeal, that you look for when you're trying to bring together this team of people that's going to make things happen?
So we look at three things. We look at one, and one of the very first things I did when I created Babylon was I wrote a document, say we are Babylon. That document I think is available on our website. There's a public document. I basically said in it that we have a public mission to make healthcare accessible, affordable, put it in the hands of every human being on earth. But we also have a private objective, which is to do so without being jerks, to do so in an organization where people are decent human beings. And so when we created Babylon, the first point was, we said we are hiring people, but when we hire them, we want to answer three questions. One is that these people are among the most exceptional people in their field. So we genuinely do really hard to hire the top 1 to 2% of the people. We're solving one of the world's most difficult intellectual problems, and we need very good people at it. So that's hygiene. They need to have experience. They need to be very good at what they do. And we wrote 6 behaviors on what we need, and being, what does it mean to be a great Babylonian? One is compassion. As I said, it's really important to us. We're in the business of healthcare, and therefore people who have empathy are very important to get. 2 is creativity. The problem we're trying to solve can't be solved easily. You know, as you solve your problems, that you can solve maths in a very basic way, but as it gets more and more complex, you need more and more creativity in solving the problems. 3, inclusivity. As I said, the intelligence of many is always more than a few. So we don't want people who are just all about me, but we want people who bring others to solve the problem. And then tenacity, positivity, and ownership. And tenacity really matters, because frankly, hard problems don't get solved quickly. So you should have the persistence to stick with it until you solve it. And positivity, I mean, we all have people we know who are just negative. I mean, everything is a problem. Everything is there. And I just think that in business, in your company, if you can choose it, it's better to keep them out. Because I call them energy vampires, right? They just suck the energy out of life. So I think both in personal life and at work, you want to surround yourself by positive people. That doesn't mean they are idealistic. That means they're just trying to solve. They're realistic in seeing a problem, but they don't just say can't be done. They're trying to find a way to solve it. They don't say I can't be done, impossible. They say let me figure out how to do it. Right. So we look for these traits in our interview process. We're just looking for these behaviors. And then the second question for us is, do we have something exceptional for these exceptional people we found to do? Because you know full well, if you hire people and give them something that they're not excited about, they just leave, right? That's why I left my investment bank when I did, right? You have to keep giving people amazing stuff so they do their most amazing work in it. And then the third question we always ask is, do I trust them to bring up my children? Do they have the kind of values that I want to see my friends and family and my children, because I tell you, and you see that in your organization, um, good people are good people and they make the environment around them good. Most organizations that I see that don't do well, they don't do well not because they don't have very intelligent people. They don't do well because often the energy of those intelligent people goes into fighting each other, into conniving against each other, into politics. That kind of stuff are poisonous to a company. Now, anywhere that you put 100 people in, you will always have ambitious people in, especially. You will always have some kind of issues, politics. You gather 100 people, you have different ways of solving problem, and people sometimes clash. That's fine. You just want them to be good people who do so in a decent way with each other.
That's fascinating. You mentioned in there that you need to have these exceptional people solving exceptional problems. I was just wondering, especially in the situation the country is in at the moment with the national lockdowns and so on, what is the most or an exceptional problem that a company like yourselves is trying to solve with artificial intelligence, online doctor appointments, and so on?
Look, the fundamental problem we're trying to solve is how do you do with healthcare what Google did with information? How do you make it accessible, affordable, put it in the hands of every human being on earth? How do you make it possible for a child in a remote village in a very poor country have the same access to healthcare that you have, right? In the same way that as long as they have access to the internet, that child has the same access to the same information you have today. And while that sounds normal for your generation, I had to go to UCL to have access to information so I can get to the UCL library, right? Unless you had access to that library, you actually had no access to that much, even papers, right, at the time. So that was our starting problem. Now, look at these words, accessible, and you guys know that because engineering teaches you this, that take a big problem and put it into its constituent forming parts and solve for those constituent parts. So accessibility nowadays is much easier because as long as I can deliver most of the healthcare most people need on devices, most of them already have these mobile phones, then it's highly accessible. The problem is, and we in Rwanda, one of the poorest, financially poorest, culturally richest, but financially poorest countries in the world, we now deliver universal healthcare to everyone across the country, primary universal care, because everybody has access to a mobile phone. And we can do most of the healthcare they need on that mobile phone. The problem is there's no accessibility without affordability. So then you sit as an engineer, because it's about solving a problem. You sit and say, okay, so what makes something expensive in healthcare? And if you just write a spreadsheet with all the costs in healthcare and then you parse it or put it in buckets, what you see is that if you cut it by outgoing, you see that 2/3 of all the costs in healthcare is on salaries. Human beings in healthcare are the most expensive part of healthcare, right? Doctors, nurses are among the rarest and therefore among the most expensive assets of any country. And if you cut it by diseases, 70% of all the costs are in predictive preventative diseases, preventable diseases. So in a way, if you want to solve that problem, you just need to say, okay, how can I automate as much as possible what these doctors and nurses are doing so they can just do the most complex things and the simplest stuff can be automated? I mean, whether you believe it or not, 50% of the time of a doctor in the United States is spent on paperwork. It's completely unnecessary, right? About 20, 30% in UK is spent on paperwork, right? I mean, a surgeon in UK only does surgery on average 1 day a week, like 1 day a week, right? It's a waste of resource, right? So on the other hand, why do we do this with healthcare? Imagine you guys are in the business of engineering. Imagine a machine that we just wait until the machine to break down, and then we go and spend a lot of money fixing it, right? That's what we used to do with our cars. 20, 30 years ago, we drove the cars until it broke down. We took it to a garage, right? A mechanic who fixed it. Today, we don't do that. Today, we buried enough sensors in our cars and we take them for regular services, and cars basically don't break down anymore, right? Why don't we do that with the human body? We have the technology to collect a huge amount of data out of humans. We have the AI or the analytical power to collect that information and constantly analyze it. And we are able today to predict how you're going to do in a few days' time. I mean, for my sins, unfortunately, I support Arsenal football team, right? And we're doing so badly, so it's a very painful team to support. But we know today which Arsenal player can play this weekend, because we are monitoring these players very closely, and the coaches know precisely who's going to come up with a cold, who's going to come up with a thing. That it's not hard, right? If I ask you to run and I know what your normal speed is and I know what your normal heart rate when you do a run, and I see that you're doing the same run and your heart is beating a little bit faster than normal, it doesn't take a genius to figure out your heart is already fighting something else, right? Even if you're wearing an Apple Watch at nighttime, if your heartbeat, resting heartbeat is more than normal, you know something going wrong, that heart is fighting something, right? So that's the problem we're trying to solve. And it's a fascinating problem and it's highly doable. So I'm a huge believer that by the time you guys are my age, healthcare will be utterly accessible and affordable for every human being on earth. There's no reason why we can't do it.
Wow, thank you. That definitely sounds like a fascinating problem, and I hope your prediction is right. I would like to now pass over to Basil. Hopefully, he should have some questions from the audience from the chat. Basil?
Hello. Yeah. So hopefully we get enough time to answer most of the questions. So first question came from Javon. Javon, do you want to come up and ask your question yourself, or do you want me to ask it for you?
I can ask it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So hi, I'm Javon. So I'm currently doing a PhD in the engineering department at UCL, and I wanted to know how you sort of felt your PhD helped with your entrepreneurial career, if it did at all. Because I'm sort of a similar position where, I don't know, but I sort of know that setting up a business is something that I want to do, and I'm sort of like using my spare time with my PhD and obviously the flexibility of it to understand how I can do that. So how would you say that your PhD actually helped with your entrepreneurial career?
So I think, Gibran, a PhD, as you know, gives you the opportunity to solve a big problem, right? And that's what you do in business. In business, that's what all you're doing. You're finding a problem and trying to solve it. And the bigger that problem, the bigger the opportunity, right? So you look at the most valuable companies in the world, you will almost get to directly draw a line between how valuable they are and how big was the problem they solved. I mean, we use Google. I mean, the problem of distribution of data and information was a ginormous global problem. They solved it and they reaped the benefit of it. So that's all you're doing when you set up a business. So everything you do in your PhD. So how do you write your PhD? Your first chapter is literature survey. That's the equivalent of looking and seeing that who else is doing and how solving the problem that you want to solve, right? Your second chapter is, okay, what is exactly the problem? Then it's, how am I going to solve it? Then it's what is my exact solution? Then how am I going to solve that solution, right? These are the things you do in a business. The only difference between a PhD and a business is that PhD by and large is an intellectual affair. In a business, you need to rally other people, other resources to do that for you. No big problem can be solved by a single person. So frankly, in Babylon, I do nothing. I don't write a line of code. I don't see any patients. I don't do anything, right? So I can only deliver what Babylon delivers by persuading other people to come and work there and giving them the opportunity to do a great job, to deliver their thing. So that's a skill set is not a skill set you learn in a PhD. So therefore, it's different than a PhD, and yet it's not that dissimilar.
Okay. Thank you. I also sorry.
Good luck with it, both your PhD and building your business.
Thank you. I really liked your quote, would you trust them to bring up your own children? I don't know how I've never heard that before, but that's an amazing line. Thank you.
Thank you.
I saw this really interesting question from Kian about accessible healthcare. Kian, do you want to ask it yourself?
I think you can go ahead with that.
Okay, so the question was, what are some of the dangers of accessible healthcare and can it be misused?
No, it cannot be misused and it has no danger. You got to be super clear about who says too much healthcare is a bad thing. It's usually people who have too much healthcare. But then they look around and say, or it's a doctor or our nurses and say, well, what does it mean to my time, right? What it doesn't say is, what does it mean to that mother who doesn't have access to find out what their child is suffering from? What does it mean to 50% of the world population who have no access to healthcare, according to World Health Organization? 5 out of 7 billion people on our planet have no access to secondary care, to no surgery. In Britain, one of the richest countries in the world, if you have a mental health issues, we don't deal with it. We just wait for it until it gets into crisis, and then we'll try to put you into emergency or into mental health hospitals to try and get you out of the crisis, and then leave you out in the society to fall apart again and come back, right? There is no such thing, in the same way that there is no such thing as too much education. There is no such thing as too much healthcare. But I am familiar with the argument that says, and the root of that argument is because we have a short supply of it. And we've persuaded ourselves to say, it's okay if we ration the delivery of it. It's not okay for those who are not receiving it. For those people, it genuinely is a matter of life and death. So instead of us getting comfortable with the fact that it is okay not to give everybody healthcare, we should actually engage in the question of how can we give everybody healthcare.
Thank you.
But Ken, I was negative towards your question, but there is also a positive side of it, which is there was a time back in the 40s, 50s, 30s, where there was a shortage of food, particularly after the Second World War. And then we had the whole revolution in the food industry, which means now in the West, we have too much food. And we've come across a lot of free food, cheap food. And now we've come across problems that we didn't imagine we could have, right? And I think that there may be challenges that too much healthcare will bring in future that we haven't thought about. So you may be absolutely right that there may be problems that we will have in future, but at the moment, right now, we have significant problems that we have to solve, and we shouldn't let the fear of those problems in future stop us from solving the existing problem.
Thank you very much for that. I think that was a really interesting answer. I really like that. I got this question from Darius. Darius, do you want to ask yourself, or should I just go ahead?
I can do that.
Yeah.
Hi there. So I'm Darius. I'm also passionate about this entire entrepreneurial part of things. And sometimes I was wondering, what if I, dropped out of university, or let's say in the future out of PhD or my master's, and just, went for a business instead, and maybe invest, those, 3-4 years of studies into the actual company. Would I get much further, or would it be much worse?
Darius, I'm a big believer that you'll end up wherever you need to end up, irrespective of which way you get there, right? I mean, by this stage in your life, you have all the characteristics you need to succeed or fail, whichever way it was going to happen, right? So I don't think these steps are as important. I've seen entrepreneurs who left the school and have become hugely successful. I mean, the richest, the most important, most famous entrepreneurs in the world, right? Larry Ellison, Bill Gates, you name it, right? All Steve Jobs, they all were the university dropouts, like Mark Zuckerberg, right? And I've seen entrepreneurs who finished their PhD and did very well, right? And I've seen entrepreneurs who had a full career of doing very menial jobs, right? And then after they retired, or very average jobs, after they retired, Lord Thompson, who created the Thompson holidays and the started at the age of 65, right? The KFC chain was started when Colonel, whatever his name was 65, right? After retirement, when he got his first pension, he just looked at it and said, how am I going to live on that? By the time he was 85, he was a billionaire, right? At the time. So there is no one way that gets you there, but you live once, my friend. You only live once, and every year that goes, it's a year you never get back. Never get back. And you have no idea how long that life is. So you should spend that life where you are doing the thing you love to do and you're most passionate about, and is the best use of that life.
All right, thank you. That was a good answer.
I think your second part of the answer about you only live once. So I think that answers another question in our which I was going to bring up, but I'm going to ask another question instead from Mariam. She just posted this question. Do you want to do it, or should I go ahead?
Yeah, I can ask it.
Yep.
There's a lot of like start a business, or kind of go ahead and follow your heart and your ideas, but coming from an academic background, how do you go about developing your entrepreneurial skills? Is it, through having small businesses and learning from your mistakes, or is it intuitive?
It's all of the above, right? So there is no right or wrong way, in the same way that in the academic life is not a right or wrong way, right? You can be an academic and end up doing not so well, and you could be an academic and end up winning the Nobel Prize, right? So it is, success is a relative term, right? You're now sitting in a home. The home you're sitting in is the dream of a homeless person, right? You're wearing nice clothes. The clothes you're wearing is the dream of somebody who has none, right? You are involved in a university. That's the dream of so many people who have no access to education, right? So success is a very relative term, right? Any job you get will be the dream of a jobless person, right? So, so don't beat yourself up on, I have to be a Steve Jobs. You don't have to be a Steve Jobs. You just need to have a fruitful life, right? And you need to know what the purpose of your life is. If the purpose of your life is, I think it was Westinghouse, a great engineer, who said, if you want to be famous, go shoot a president, right? But if you want to have an impact, just figure out how you can leave the world a better place than you left it. You're not going to change the world. No one human being can. But just what you can do, what you can touch, you could do. If you can leave it better than you left it, you have been a good human being, right? And if you make a mess of it, you know what? The world will clean it up. It doesn't matter, right? But you made a mess of it, right? So I wouldn't think too much about, if I become an entrepreneur, do I succeed or do I fail? Or if I become this, you just don't know. What you do know is, what are you enjoying to do? And what do you want to do? And how do you want to have an impact, right?
That was a very kind of reassuring and positive answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I'm sure, as everyone else, we're all really enjoying these answers from Dr. Parsa, but unfortunately, we're almost out of time. So I'm going to pass it back to Ben now.
Thank you, Basil. Yeah, I just wondered if, thank you for those answers and for sharing your wisdom, Dr. Parsa. I wondered if you have any final words for us.
No, I mean, I think you guys, look, you all are doing phenomenally well. You are at UCL. I was doing a session like this with a group of people at Imperial. And obviously, you know, the rivalry between UCL and Imperial. And I was just saying, you poor people, what did you do wrong that not to get into UCL, right? So you guys got into UCL. So you're doing, I give everything I have. When I was 40, I met a person, very famous person, David Bernstein, who created the Carlyle Group, who's one of the world's richest men. I was talking to David and he said, look, Ali, I give everything I got, every dollar to be your age, to be 40 again. So now I'm 55. I give every dollar I got to be your age, to have the opportunities that you have in front of you. You have the biggest asset of them all, your intelligence, your youth. Life is in front of you, right? Grab it, use it, make sure you don't regret anything in it. There is no failure in this life. You'll do whatever you want to do. But as you go, and I said that when I was lucky enough to be invited to do the graduation speech for the peers before you in the engineering department, I kind of said, make sure that whatever problem you try to pick up to do, make sure it matters. Dream big. Don't waste your life on something really small and tiny. Build it fast, because life will go very quickly. Time passes quickly. You see how quickly your time at university is passing. But be brilliant. Don't cut corners. Whatever you do, don't make something mediocre, something average, something that you can't be proud of. Whatever you do, remember Steve Jobs created Apple because he cared about how the inside of the machine looked like, something that nobody else saw, right? And then finally, and I just leave you with that, if you're going to dream big, is because you have the opportunity to do that. You are where you are because you're lucky. Just make it part of whatever you do in life to make it possible for other people to meet their dream too. I'm coming to you today for no other reason, because if I can share some of what I do with you, and then that helps one of you in a tiniest way, that's time well spent, right? Never be greedy or selfish with your time and what you can give others, right? If you guys stick to that, that's what I learned, and you will have your own principles that you will stick to, because I can't tell you what you do with yours. I can just tell you what I found with mine. You're going to do just fine. And I wish you every success in whatever you do next in life, guys. You live in the most exciting times that any human being has ever left before you. This is the time of the greatest acceleration in technology and development we have ever seen in history, and you got it right in front of you. So enjoy it. Have a great time. And I wish you every success.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today and answering our questions.
Thank you. All the very best.